Hi everybody, this is a video for William Blake's poem Nurse's Song. Some of you, all of you, might know that there are two poems called Nurse's Song in Innocence and Experience. This is the Innocence version, so it might be a good idea to immediately after watching this video to go and look at the Experience video to see how the same concept is approached by two very different perspectives. This is for students studying William Blake for their A-level in literature. The poem is, I think, one of the more simple ones, and it's often a poem that is good to use if you have a question or an essay topic which is about the child's relationship with a guardian or a parent or adults more generally, which tends to be typical of Blake. So in this poem, it's a depiction of a nurturing and positive relationship between a nurse, who is their nanny, so to speak, and children who are playing outside. Very simply, the nurse looks out the window, notices that night is coming, the sun is setting, and she asks the children to come indoors and stop playing. The children reply back to say they're not ready to come indoors yet. And the nurse says, okay, you can stay outside and play some more then. So the nurse does not constrain or control these children, but allows them more time to play, therefore more freedom in the green world, which was consistent with romantic ideology, capital R ideology, of allowing children outdoors as part of their learning or part of their freedom. Like I said, the Nurse's Song in Experience has the same kind of concept, but it is approached in a very different way, and we often say that the Experience version is the antithesis of this one, which means it's completely the opposite in terms of its depiction of the same event. So the poem is 4 stanzas long, 4 quatrains, with a regular rhyme scheme of A, B, C, B, and that, typical of Blake, creates that musical nursery rhyme-like rhythm and rhyme to it. Obviously we have the word song in the title, and this rhyme scheme is consistent with that song-like quality. One of the first images that we have in the poem is the green, which we've had before, for example in the echoing green, which could either be a field, a meadow, a piece of grass, or a village green, for example. And being confronted with that straight away suggests that nature and humans, i.e. the children, are in harmony, so there's an equilibrium here. And for Blake, when those two things, nature and humans, are in equilibrium, there's a greater sense of happiness. There's laughing heard, and the nurse is the speaker, shown through that possessive determiner my, and she hears the children playing, and it makes her feel content. It helps her feel happy, which is of course very different to the effect that hearing the children has on the nurse in Experience. So far so good. When we move into the second stanza, we then have the dialogue of the nurse, and this stanza is all about the nurse requesting that the children come indoors because the sun is setting. And in Blake, of course, the sun is a typical motif to show the passing of time, the idea that a period of time is always transient, and the sun setting could be the end of something, but the sun rising could also be the beginning of something. And there is, at the end of this stanza, reference to morning, which suggests a degree of hope and optimism that light and freedom will return tomorrow, which is not what happens in the Experience counterpart, where there is no mention at all of morning. The nurse in her request is very kind of gentle. There's nothing really here that's very bullying or dictatorial. It's a very kind of kind request, which again is maybe at odds with the feelings that the nurse has in Experience. So the nurse is saying, it's getting dark, come indoors. The third stanza is the children speaking, and they reply to her and they engage in what I would call a democratic dialogue. because it's democratic, because the nurse is listening. In other words, the children have a choice here. So the children reply, and they basically say, no, we can still play outside more yet. It's not quite dark. We're too awake to sleep. The birds are still flying. The sheep are still on the hills. We're not ready to come indoors. Birds, of course, have been used many times in Blake in these poems, a motif of freedom. And there, again, here in those two bottom lines, there is again reference to the pastoral or the green world to reinforce the children's argument that they are okay to stay up still because of the birds still flying and the sheep still on the hill. So there is this democratic dialogue. So despite the falling darkness, the nurse listens to what they have to say. So the poem finishes with the nurse's reply to that. So she listens to them, and the nurse actually comes to the conclusion that the children can stay outside and play despite the light fading. And this is Blake's way, I think, of suggesting that this dynamic between the nurse and the children is more positive because there's no bitterness, there's no jealousy, unlike the experienced version. But the nurse is also not controlling or restricting these children at all. She's allowing them to make their own decisions and their own sense of freedom. She's not imposing any constraint. And there's this general sense that therefore Blake is saying that she's a good nurse, she's a good guardian, because she's not imposing any rules or any sense of duty that she has onto the children. And the children, of course, are very happy about this, shown through that syndetic list of verbs: leaped, shouted, laughed. I think there's something quite lamb-like about that, as if these children are like lambs skipping and leaping over the fields because they're so happy and jolly. And the last word is echoed, which I think is supposed to be pronounced echoed, so it rhymes with bed. This sense that even nature and the hills are laughing and enjoying this kind of all-consuming sense of joy that these children are also feeling. So the green world is again in almost cahoots with the happiness that these children are feeling because the nurse listened and allowed them to make their own decisions. So that is Nurse's song, and what I would suggest is that you go and now watch the experience version, the experience version of this video, to get the opposite side when we change this concept from innocence into experience.